October 22nd, 2011. It is the eve of the biggest fixture in the English Premier League calendar, the Manchester Derby. Across the city, players from both City and United are likely engaging in strict pre-match rituals, visualizing tactics, getting massages, or sleeping early. But Mario Balotelli is not like other players. At 1:00 a.m. inside his £3 million Cheshire mansion, the Italian striker decided that the bathroom window was the perfect launchpad for a heavy-duty fireworks display. Predictably, chaos ensued. A rocket ricocheted, towels caught fire, and within minutes the bathroom was engulfed in flames. 2 fire crews arrived to extinguish the blaze, and Balotelli was forced to flee his own home, checking into a hotel, while the tabloids scrambled to print the story of the mad Italian who tried to burn his house down. It was the height of irresponsibility, the kind of incident that would see most players benched or suspended. But Mario Balotelli operates in a different reality. Just 36 hours later, he walked onto the pitch at Old Trafford. He didn't look shaken, he looked bored. When he slotted the opening goal past David De Gea, silence fell over the theater of dreams. Balotelli didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply lifted his jersey over his head to reveal a handwritten message on his undershirt that would become one of the most iconic images in football history. Why always me? It was a question that defined a generation. To the public, the answer seemed obvious. It was always him, because he was a magnet for madness. By the time he was 21, the mythology surrounding Balotelli was so dense that nobody knew what was real and what was fiction. The British press reported that he once drove his Maserati around Manchester with £25,000 in cash loosely thrown on the passenger seat. When police pulled him over and asked why he had so much money, he famously shrugged and replied, "Because I am rich." There were darker stories too, like the time he was fined £100,000 for throwing darts out of a first-floor window at youth team players because he was bored. He was portrayed as a cartoon character, a chaotic force of nature who existed solely for our entertainment. But does a madman possess the self-awareness to ask, why always me? To understand the true madness of Mario Balotelli, we have to look past the fireworks and the Ferraris. We have to realize that his erratic behavior wasn't just banter. It was a scream for attention from a young man experiencing a profound identity crisis. Was he crazy, or was he the broken product of a cruel system? This video is not just a compilation of his wildest scandals. It is the story of a black boy growing up in an Italy that refused to accept him, a talent caught between 2 families, and a man who spent his entire career trying to answer the question he asked the world that day, at Old Trafford: who exactly is Mario? To understand why Mario Balotelli set fire to his own house, we first have to understand the fire that was burning inside him long before he ever kicked a ball. The narrative of the Mad Mario usually begins with fast cars and red cards, but the true story begins in a hospital ward in Palermo, Sicily, in 1990. He wasn't born Mario Balotelli. He was born Mario Barwa, the son of Ghanaian immigrants, and he entered this world not as a prodigy, but as a tragedy waiting to happen. Born with a life-threatening intestinal malformation, Mario spent the first year of his life hovering between life and death. He underwent multiple surgeries, a fragile infant fighting a battle his body was barely equipped to win. His biological parents, Thomas and Rose Barwa, were living in poverty in a tiny apartment, struggling to make ends meet in a country that wasn't their own. Overwhelmed by the medical costs and the demands of caring for a chronically ill child, they made a decision that would haunt Mario for the rest of his life. They gave him up. At the age of 3, social services placed him in the foster care of the Balotelli family, Francesco and Silvia, a white upper-middle-class couple from Brescia. Physically, Mario survived. He grew strong. But emotionally, a wound was opened that never closed. As Mario grew older and his footballing talent became undeniable, the narrative became complicated. When he became a superstar, his biological parents resurfaced, claiming they had given him up out of necessity and love. Mario saw it differently. To him, this wasn't sacrifice. It was abandonment. In a scathing open letter published in Vanity Fair Italy in 2008, he publicly rejected them, accusing them of only wanting to be part of his life once he became famous. "If I hadn't become Mario Balotelli, Mr. and Mrs. Barwa would not have cared about what happened to me," he wrote. This is the origin of his rage. Deep down, the golden boy believed he was disposable, valued only for what he could provide, not for who he was. But the trauma of his childhood was compounded by the brutal reality of his adolescence. Mario was a black boy growing up in Brescia, a region in northern Italy that is notoriously conservative. He faced a unique and cruel form of isolation. He was Italian in every way. He spoke the dialect, he ate the food, he lived the culture, but the law told him he was an alien. Due to Italy's strict jus sanguinis citizenship laws, Mario was not recognized as an Italian citizen until he turned 18. For his entire childhood, he was a foreigner in the only home he had ever known, forced to carry a residence permit to live with his own foster parents. When he finally stepped onto the professional pitch, this legal rejection turned into visceral hatred. Italian football has a dark history with racism, but with Balotelli, it was personal. He wasn't just a black player, he was a black Italian, and for the ultra-nationalist fans, this was an affront to their identity. The breaking point came in 2009 during a match against Juventus. The hostility wasn't subtle. Thousands of fans in the stands chanted, "Non ci sono negri italiani," there are no black Italians. It was a collective denial of his existence. Week after week, he was subjected to monkey chants. In Rome, he had bananas thrown at him. Most players would crumble under this hate or perhaps withdraw. Mario did neither. He weaponized his personality. Psychologists would argue that Balotelli's madness, the arrogance, the swagger, the refusal to celebrate goals, was a sophisticated defense mechanism. He built a persona that was untouchable. If he acted like he didn't care, then they couldn't hurt him. When he stood motionless after scoring, glaring at the crowd, he wasn't being lazy. He was staring down a country that refused to love him. He became the villain they treated him as because it was easier to be hated for being crazy than to be hated simply for being black. The fireworks, the fights, the camouflaged Bentleys, these were the armor of a young man screaming to be seen not just as a footballer, but as a human being. If Mario Balotelli's childhood was defined by the absence of a father figure, his professional career was defined by his desperate, chaotic search for one. He didn't just need a coach to teach him tactics, he needed a man to teach him how to be a man. And in this Shakespearean tragedy of wasted talent, two figures emerged to fill that void, the strict disciplinarian, Jose Mourinho, and the indulgent parent, Roberto Mancini. At Inter Milan, the collision between the unstoppable force of Balotelli's ego and the immovable object of Mourinho's authority was inevitable. Mourinho, a manager who demands absolute obedience, looked at the teenage Mario and saw a puzzle he couldn't solve. He publicly questioned Balotelli's work ethic, famously stating in an interview that Mario had one brain cell. But the defining anecdote of their relationship, a story Mourinho still tells with a mix of horror and amusement, occurred during a Champions League match against Rubin Kazan. The squad was decimated by injuries. No Eto'o, no Milito. Balotelli was the only striker available. But in the 43rd minute, Mario picked up a yellow card. Mourinho spent the entire 15-minute halftime break speaking exclusively to Mario. He begged him, "Mario, I cannot change you. I have no strikers on the bench. Don't touch anybody. Play only with the ball. When you lose the ball, no reaction. If someone provokes you, no reaction. If the referee makes a mistake, no reaction. Mario, please." Balotelli nodded. He went back out for the second half. And in the 46th minute, 60 seconds after the restart, he kicked an opponent and received a straight red card. To the world, this was comedy. To Mourinho, it was proof that Balotelli was unmanageable. It was a failure of discipline. But viewed through the lens of Mario's psychology, it was something sadder. It was the behavior of a child who simply could not process consequence. When Mourinho cast him aside, Mario found refuge in the arms of Roberto Mancini at Manchester City. If Mourinho was the teacher who expelled him, Mancini was the father who kept bailing him out of jail. The relationship between Mancini and Balotelli is perhaps the most fascinating psychological case study in modern football. It was toxic, volatile, and deeply loving. Mancini indulged Mario in a way no other manager would. When Mario threw darts at youth players, Mancini fined him but played him the next week. When Mario crashed his car, Mancini put an arm around him. Mancini saw the broken child inside the man and believed that if he offered enough love, the talent would eventually shine through. And for one glorious moment in May 2012, Mancini was right. It is the final day of the Premier League season. Manchester City needs to beat QPR to win their first title in 44 years. They are losing. It is chaos. In the dying seconds, the ball falls to Mario Balotelli at the edge of the box. He is falling backwards, slipping on the turf. In any other season, in any other game, Mad Mario might have tried a selfish shot or lashed out in frustration. But in this moment, amidst the deafening noise of the Etihad Stadium, he found a moment of perfect clarity. As he fell, he stretched out a leg and guided a delicate, precise pass into the path of Sergio Aguero. Aguero! That goal changed history. But the statistic that haunts this story is this. That pass to Aguero was Mario Balotelli's only assist of the entire season. He spent 9 months causing chaos only to provide the singular moment of sanity that delivered the title. It was a flash of genius that justified all of Mancini's patience. But patience has a limit. The father-son dynamic ultimately collapsed under the weight of Mario's self-destruction. The end came not in a stadium, but on the reigning training pitches of Carrington in January 2013. After a dangerous tackle by Balotelli on a teammate, Mancini finally snapped. Photographers captured the shocking images, the manager of Manchester City gripping his own player by the collar, trying to wrestle him to the ground in a fit of rage. It was a violent physical breakup. Mancini later admitted he wanted to punch Mario. It was the moment the father finally gave up on the son. Without Mancini's protection, Balotelli was exposed. He was sold to AC Milan weeks later. However, before the final slide into obscurity, there was one last explosion of brilliance, the final act of defiance. Euro 2012. In the semi-final against Germany, a team favored to win the tournament, Balotelli produced the most complete performance of his life. He scored a header, and then receiving a long ball, he smashed a thunderbolt past Manuel Neuer. What happened next is etched into football folklore. He didn't smile, he didn't run to the corner flag, he ripped off his shirt and stood frozen in the center of the pitch, muscles flexed, staring stone-faced at the world. The Hulk pose. It was a message to the racists in Italy who said he didn't belong. It was a message to the critics who called him crazy. In that moment, he was a giant. He was powerful. He was undeniable. But that pose was the peak of the mountain. The descent on the other side was steep and brutal. After Euro 2012, the Golden Boy began to rust. His return to AC Milan started well, but ended in tears literally, with Balotelli weeping on the bench after being substituted, overwhelmed by the racist abuse and his own failing form. Then came the disastrous transfer to Liverpool, a move Brendan Rodgers never wanted, where Mario looked like a ghost of himself. From there, the clubs got smaller and the headlines got sadder. Nice. Marseille, Brescia, Monza, Adana Demirspor in Turkey, Sion in Switzerland. The brilliance became sporadic, appearing only in YouTube, highlight reels of meaningless goals in second-tier leagues. The physical gifts were still there, but the fire that Mancini had tried to nurture and Mourinho had tried to tame was gone. The man who had once burned down his house was now just watching the embers of his career fade away alone. So why do we still care? Why, after all the burnt bridges, the red cards, and the failed transfers, do we still look back at Mario Balotelli with a smile rather than a scowl? The answer lies in the stories that happen away from the cameras, the urban legends that paint a picture not of a madman, but of a misunderstood soul with a heart too big for the world he lives in. There is a famous story from his time in Manchester that sums up the paradox of Mario. One day after training, he reportedly saw a young boy and his mother waiting outside the gates for an autograph. Mario stopped his Maserati, but he didn't just sign the shirt. When the boy told him he was being bullied at school, Mario didn't offer a platitude. He told the boy to get in the car. He drove them straight to the school, marched into the headmaster's office, and demanded a resolution mediating the conflict between the bully and the victim himself. There are other tales of him driving around Manchester dressed as Santa Claus, handing out cash to the homeless or paying for everyone's petrol at a gas station. Whether these stories are entirely factual or embellished by folklore doesn't really matter. They exist because the public wants them to be true. They reflect what we instinctively feel about him, that beneath the fireworks and the fury, Mario Balotelli is profoundly human. In an era of modern football defined by PR-sanitized superstars where players are trained to speak in robotic cliches and protect their brand at all costs, Balotelli was a glitch in the matrix. He was authentic chaos. He never pretended to be a role model. He just lived messy and loud in full view of a judgmental world. We loved him because he was the anti-hero, the one who did the things we all secretly wanted to do but were too afraid to try. And this brings us back to the question he asked us on that cold afternoon at Old Trafford, why always me? It wasn't just a question about the tabloids. It was a question about his existence. It was always him because he refused to conform. He refused to be the grateful, quiet immigrant the Italian establishment wanted him to be. He refused to be the disciplined soldier Mourinho wanted him to be. He insisted on being Mario, flawed, childish, brilliant, and broken all at once. As the curtain falls on his career, Mario Balotelli leaves us with the ultimate sporting tragedy, the what if. Physically, he had everything. He had the speed and power of Cristiano Ronaldo, the finishing of a classic number 9, and the technical grace of a Brazilian playmaker. He was built in a lab to be the greatest striker of his generation. But he was trapped in the mind of a child who was never allowed to heal from the trauma of abandonment and the poison of racism. Mario Balotelli isn't a villain. He is a cautionary tale about the weight of expectation. We wanted him to be a god. He just wanted to be loved. As we watch him now playing out his final years in the quiet corners of global football, the anger is gone. What remains is a quiet sadness for the goals we never saw and a fondness for the madness we did. He set his house on fire, yes, but for a few brief shining years he set the world on fire too. and football is a much more boring place without him. Thank you for watching. Do you think Mario Balotelli wasted his talent, or was the world simply too cruel for him? Share your favorite Super Mario moment in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please like and subscribe for more stories behind the headlines.